Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for some of you. Very glad to have all of you here. Thank you for coming. We are very excited to have Professor Cynthia Breazeal here today, of course, talking about her research and as well as her entrepreneurship journey. This webinar is for the MIT Bootcamp's graduate community and friends. We also have guests today here from MIT Expro. And just before we begin, I wanted to share a few notes about how this got started, what we have in store, and some other housekeeping details. So the origin of this series, Living with AI, actually comes from conversations with many of you, very treasured in-person conversations during our last program here at MIT, the Venture Advancement Program, where a lot of you were interested in speaking specifically with Professor Cynthia Breazeal, but also interested in getting access to information that is available through MIT on this hot topic. And we've also had interactions on Zoom and via email with a lot of you. So I know it's a very much treasured, interesting space. Of course, ChatGPT is a catalyst for this, but we believe there's a lot of converging trends happening. It's very hard to make sense of all of these trends, and we really hope that we are able to assist you with making your decisions, whether you are an entrepreneur interested in innovation or an entrepreneur, a business owner. You need to be able to make sense. And in my opinion, the best strategy to do this is to get the latest information from the best sources. So here at MIT, we have a great opportunity to share the research that comes from MIT and is originated here. Professor Breazeal, for example, is at the source of the field that is now called social robotics. And we are also hoping to bring other experts on other topics in this field. For example, field of synthetic media and many others. So it's an important note. We are planning the series to be entirely free for you and your close group of contacts, so you can share this opportunity with them. But before we go in, I just wanted to share that what makes it possible is your engagement. This is your community. Word of mouth is one of the best ways and channels to get the most outstanding students to our programs. And when you introduce people to us, we get a chance of becoming sort of knowing your colleagues, the people that you work with, becoming a part of this community after graduating our programs. So in a way, we're kind of molding the programs because of your referrals to contain a very interesting, vibrant community, very diverse. And the foundational and innovation leadership course, which a lot of you took, is either online or in person, is one of the ways that you can become a member of this community. We also have had our first in-person program for more advanced experienced entrepreneurs, venture advancement, and that's also a way to become part of this community. So Jessica, if you don't mind sharing the next slide, I'd like to share just 3 very specific ways in which you can help to keep this effort going. Very simple. Continue to refer your best friends, family, colleagues to attend the programs. The next one coming up is Innovation Leadership. It starts in October. I think the early bird deadline is this July. And there's a very special offer. So for anyone attending this webinar, and for all of the graduate community members forever, you have a special referral discount. It's a $500 discount. We'll share the links with you. So if you fill in that form, you get this, the participant, the student will get this discount. And that way you can bring in the people that you know into the community. Also continue to be engaged with us. We have an informal ambassador circle going. We might be formalizing it later, but right now it basically means being on the receiving end of more communication from us, sort of being our back channel. So please sign up. We'll get that information to you as well. And also, if you have graduated from this program and you haven't become a member of the graduate directory, please check it out, and would love you to be part of that as well. So with this, I'm going to introduce Cynthia. most of you know her already. Just to recap, and there's a lot I can say about her. I'm not going to spend too much time, but the most important thing is Professor Breazeal is a pioneer of social robotics and human-robot interactions. Her work is engaging technical innovation in AI, also UX design, as well as the psychology of engagement to create experiences that promote human flourishing. So because of that, a lot of her work is connected to social robotics applied to education, pediatrics, health and wellness, and aging. She's, of course, a fellow of many societies and spoken at prominent ventures such as TED and UN. She has received numerous design awards, and she is a graduate of MIT. She received her doctorate in 2000 from MIT. Also, a very special thing about Cynthia is that she's MIT Dean for Digital Learning. And in this capacity, she's oversees MIT bootcamps and X-Pro as part of corporate education. And she's also the director of the MIT-wide initiative that centers around responsible AI for social empowerment and education. You can check it out. It's called race.mit.edu. And of course, she has also co-founded a consumer robotics company, Jibo. So there's a lot to learn about from Cynthia. And I'm going to welcome her next. She will present her story for about 1 hour, after which we will have a Q&A session. But if you have questions in the meantime, you can share them in the Q&A tab, and we will try to address as many of them as possible. Thank you, and let's welcome Professor Cynthia Breazeal.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Hannah, for that great introduction. Let me bring up my slides here. And okay, I hope everyone can see these okay. So I've just talked about this slide, how basically, back when we were starting the company, the argument was AI robotics was going to be kind of one of the next big frontiers. This, by the way, was before Alexa. This was before Google Home. This was before ChatGPT. So this was by no means kind of like a foregone conclusion for a lot of people. People thought like the item or the hardware piece that we were going to be competing against was the mobile phone. So anyway, now, of course, we have all these other kinds of conversational AI devices that have transformed, not only how we interact with AI, but who interacts with AI on a daily basis. So I would say, once, Alexa came onto the scene, this notion of kind of AI kind of ready at voice, ready at hand, really transformed to this notion of kind of using AI in your phone to like living with AI, where you can be around your house doing various things and just call out to a conversational agent and be able to engage with it. And we started to see from young children to our oldest citizens starting to interact with AI every day through this kind of innovation of far field speech. So, a lot of that was kind of, I would say, on the pathway of my own research in social robotics, because in social robotics, it was always about being able to talk and gesture and interact with an entity. In our case, it was a robot, often a physical robot, but at distance, and understanding the human relationship and engagement with this different kind of experience where the technology, isn't just a speaker or a screen, but is actually an interactive entity, more kind of like a Star Wars droid in a lot of ways, right? So we're kind of seeing the technology start to catch up with that very early vision. And a lot of, as again, we talk about the consumer space in particular. I think it's true for any kind of market, but particularly in the consumer space, particularly for a new kind of hardware enabled experience like a social robot, you need a really awesome user experience. That was really important. And I can tell you in my field in AI and robotics, not a lot of people are thinking deeply about the human-centered design and the human experience of these technologies. It was much more focusing on the algorithms and kind of decision-making aspects of it, the computational advancements. We certainly were doing a lot of that too, but we also recognized, people have to be able, anyone, has to be able to interact in a very natural, engaging, rewarding way with these technologies or they're not going to use them, you know? So anyway, this was always a really important piece of our work. It's the intersection again of kind of design and AI and robotics. And, you know, I can tell you that as, you know, from the beginning of the field of social robotics, a lot of it was around trying to make these core advancements in like how machines can perceive and make decisions and learn from people. But as these technologies were getting more capable, our interest started to shift about, well, so what is it about a social robot that's particularly important or interesting in terms of the ecosystem of on-screen agents and other kinds of devices? You know, mobile computing devices were getting more smaller and more affordable, more capable as this work, you know, as the field of social robotics continued. And it became kind of more clear that the social and emotional experience that people had with this technology was quite different. And with that, opened up new applications and new opportunities and how people could engage with the technology to get real value. So the shifting of, you know, kind of AI as a decision support tool, like a Fitbit in health, or, you know, Khan Academy kind of thing in education, to this question of how do people interact with an autonomous AI, like a collaborative other, where the bigger objective was human flourishing and human success across a lot of different domains. So not just how do I do transactional skills like at the news and weather, but what are these more enduring long-term interactions, things that really are, you know, hugely important to people and families in their daily lives. How can AI help support that? How can AI help support us as people to become who we aspire to be, to live healthier, to learn, et cetera, et cetera? That was really kind of, I think, one of the big opportunity areas, because the social emotional engagement is so key to have success in these areas, right? So this is kind of the punchline, you know, for kind of the opportunity for social robotics, but also some of the core human experience studies, psychology studies we've done, which is just to show again and again, as we do randomized controlled trials, for instance, comparing a social robot to a virtual agent, to an on-screen agent, to a smart speaker, that the emotional engagement is much deeper with a physically embodied social entity. And when people engage emotionally, and even when they engage socially with that agent, our brains are just wired to invest in that interaction more deeply. And not surprisingly, if people invest more deeply, they can often be more successful with that technology, because we as a human beings are, you know, we're not just cognitive beings, we're cognitive, social, emotional beings, and it's all intertwined. Right. So this was kind of the big insight was, you know, if we can get that social and emotional engagement, we're going to get people to be more successful on a lot of other dimensions as well, a lot of other tasks, a lot of other services, a lot of other practical things that people want to be successful at, that it all kind of starts in this deeper social emotional space. And so, you know, this opened up this question of how do you design this humanistic experience and going beyond interaction, transactional interaction, using technology as a tool to get something done, to this relationship, this notion that you are living with this AI, it's getting to know you, you're getting to know it. There is this sense of trust and rapport that's being built over time, like a collaborative other. And it's through that relationship and through that engagement that the device is able, the robot is able to engage you in ways that helps you, again, succeed. So we talked about, you know, cool tech becomes warm tech. And there were a lot of opportunities, business opportunities, markets that we felt could be broken into with technology that were still largely kind of human, professional, service provided, where technology like a social robot could start to enter into that space in a way to provide more scalable, affordable, effective interventions that augment and support the human professional network. So we weren't trying to replace people. We're trying to make it more affordable and accessible to people working within those kind of professional networks. So this this question then of design, right? So, and again, in the field of AI, traditionally, especially in the academic discipline, kind of design is a whole other kind of space and conferences and communities, and there's kind of AI, and our work was starting to really bridge them. And as time has gone on, you know, it's been trying to make this very intertwined advancements in all of these kinds of circle areas that I put on the slide simultaneously, right? So that we are innovating in machine learning and AI at the computational level to give robots new capabilities. When we create a robot and put it in a use case, a context over time, we're trying to understand the human psychology and engagement that leads to the best outcomes for people, to make sure the robot is actually adding real measurable value on human outcomes, looking at the human experience design. How often do they use it? How long do they use it? Are they reporting, feeling that their social relationship with the robot is delightful? It's something they want. It's something they value in the experience. And then as we're, I can tell you that, as we started to deploy these robots in a lot of different domains, personalization became really, really important. There's no one size fits all. And we found that to really give people their best outcomes, the ability for these systems through interaction, through the data and so forth, to be able to personalize and adapt all aspects of that interaction became increasingly important. And now we're in this time when we talk about the responsible ethical design of these technologies. And we've been starting to advance new design frameworks, social justice design frameworks applied to artificial intelligence and robotics, whereby, really making sure that the main users and stakeholders have a voice in the design of these systems as we're creating them and iterating has become an important aspect as well. So all of these are active areas of research for us, but they're also leading, I think, to increasingly effective, increasingly capable social robot technologies.
Cynthia?
So, yes.
Sorry, real quick, would you mind just showing it from the presentation slide view versus the presenter page? That way everyone can just get the full view of your slides.
Okay, wait. So you want let me quit this again and show. So what do you want?
So I think right now you're showing it as from the presenter's end versus the presentation side.
You may try to click swap displays on the top if you see that option.
Okay, let me show this again.
Yep. And yes, so now just if you go through slideshow options at the top.
So
it's still sharing the presenter view, so we see.
Okay, so swap displays.
Yeah.
Better?
Yes. Great. Yes.
All right. I guess this is the first time I've done a presentation on this machine, so it's getting configured on the fly. All right. Okay, great. So anyway, so we're advancing new design methods, computational methods, randomized control trial, study design methods, all of these things simultaneously. So, one of the important kind of paradigms for all of this work is just appreciating that, we are extremely, again, social and emotionally intelligent creature. And there are actually specialized regions of our brain that deal with social thinking, right? So, when we interact with things in the world, there's kind of like the inanimate world, the things that we use and interact with. And then there's the animate things that we treat as an other, as a living being. And when you interact, the punchline is when you interact, honestly, with any technology, and this is the work of Cliff Nass when he was pioneering computers as social actors. Once the technology starts to interact through language, even if it's text on screen or some form of embodiment, we can't help but have our social parts of our brain very active and trying to make sense of that technology. So the punchline is your brain, when you interact with a social robot, is by default trying to make sense of it as a living, thinking being, as something that has intense desires and so forth, than a tool that you use. And you're seeing that again with ChatGPT and so forth. So the point is, this is subconscious. This is how our brains work. We're triggering these things through these kinds of technologies. And so the opportunity then is, if this is the way our brains are automatically and subconsciously trying to engage with these kinds of technologies, how do we design the technologies to support that, right? So as opposed to having people fight it or have it not make sense, there's a lot of challenge in how do you build socially intelligent machines? How do you build emotionally intelligent machines that can engage in this form of social and emotional interaction that, again, people already are trying to bring to bear when they interact with these technologies. So this is just a slide just highlighting, there are rich forms of collaboration and mental state inference and connection and so forth that are part of our social thinking. So a lot of the big AI challenges, the big AI questions we're trying to tackle in this work is social and emotional intelligence. And I think what we're seeing with ChatGPT, for instance, so many people now are having all of these interactions with a language-based model, right? That's evoking all of this social and emotional thinking. And people are starting to recognize, even with, Alexa before that, people want to be able to really talk with these things. They want to engage in and so forth in a social way. And so I think this is starting to inform even more of the research community in AI and robotics to really trying to understand this area of human-robot interaction and social and emotional intelligence for machines. So that's just being fueled, I would say, by recent advancements in ChatGPT. So a lot of this work, again, for social robotics, we call it companion AI. So again, it's about this long-term interaction where there are kind of traditional technical areas that we were always trying to support around things like machine perception and decision-making and so forth. But there's a social layer over that, right? So it's social emotive perception of people, not just of things and objects, but of people and their emotional states and their attentional states and their gestures and so forth. There's this question of learning, right? So it's not just learning from data sets, but how can these robots learn and adapt from real-time interaction with people? And as you can imagine, that's a different kind of challenge, right? We've been applying a lot of reinforcement learning and other kinds of interactive learning techniques where robots have to learn on the fly from the actual experience versus pre-trained or pre-labeled data sets. People are trying to make sense of these systems as social others. So how the robots actually express themselves through language and through their nonverbal cues is actually really important, because no matter what the robot does, I can tell you people are trying to ascribe meaning to that. So if you're not doing it intentionally, you have a real risk that the robot is going to be sending signals, unintended signals that are creating confusions, for the person in terms of what the mental state is of the robot based on the interaction. So the design of the expressive abilities of the robot becomes very, very important in getting that interaction right. And then all of these things, not only, again, in the interaction to make it natural for people in this social way, but over long-term encounters and to build rapport and to build trust, where nonverbal and verbal behavior over time is a critical piece of that. So it just, again, opened up kind of whole new areas of inquiry in the fields of artificial intelligence and robotics when he crossed over into this social agent realm. So that's kind of a lot of the framing and the challenges and the opportunities that has informed kind of this whole body of work. I want to give you an example of how this really comes to bear in the research. And this was kind of, before Jibo, where we were starting to look a lot at robots as personalized learning companions for young children. So early childhood learning and education. And the reason why we chose this domain is because young children are not going to learn from typing at a computer and so forth, right? Young children learn in many ways through social interaction and play. So the challenge was, how do you build a robot that can engage in that interaction as a pedagogical learning companion agent? And there was a lot of, prior work showing that personalized tutoring and engagement is by far the most effective ways that people do learn. So this has been an area of computer tutors that has had a long transition, never done for young children before. So social robots brought kind of that vision of the personalized pedagogical agent to a critical time of learning and intervention. I think now we understand that the most effective and important time to intervene educationally in a children's learning trajectory is as early as possible. So in early childhood, and the challenge we have, at least in the United States, as the story goes, is, we still don't have a national preschool system. So the majority of our children don't attend a quality preschool. Many children don't enter school ready to learn. If you don't enter kindergarten ready to learn, it's very difficult to catch up. So there was a huge need for this kind of opportunity in the United States. And I think, more broadly, if you could create this kind of technology, it would benefit children globally. So now we're talking about a socially interactive learning companion. You can get a sense here, like this is one of our robots. We call it the Dragon Bot. There is a different kind of interaction going on now, right? Between people you might think about today interacting with computer tutors on the screen. There is this emotive, social, relational interaction happening between children and the robot, where the robot is not trying to be the teacher. The robot is trying to be a peer-like playmate. So the teacher is still the teacher, right? And this was actually important. So teachers don't feel they're competing with our technology. The robot engages as a peer-like playmate, but with a lot of personalization and pedagogical expertise under the hood. All the child knows is they're playing with this kind of almost like Disney sidekick kind of experience on these educational games, and we're able to show that, real learning and outcomes are happening. So as time has gone on, we've been applying more and more machine learning techniques of a variety of kinds in order to kind of encode the human social code into these machines. And so a lot of it starts with, again, collecting data that's relevant to the kind of interaction we want the robot to engage in. So we would bring children into our lab and record these very rich interactions. This is a storytelling interaction. A lot of the pedagogical experiences we've designed with the robot is to engage in dialogic storytelling. We applied a lot of machine learning, effective computing techniques to track children's nonverbal cues, training different kinds of machine learning algorithms to be able to predict the cues and design the predictive interaction. And then we would bring children into the lab and have them interact with the model now put into the robot and compared to the robot-child interaction and compared to the child-child interaction. And so again, the robot now is trying to emulate the behavior of another child through these trained models. So again, more and more machine learning being applied to how we design these systems. This is an interaction now where the robot is playing a game.
Lavender color stuff.
The game is called Word Quest. It's kind of like I Spy. And the challenge word is lavender. So the child and the robot take turns panning through the scene to find lavender objects. You can see here the little girl doesn't quite know what lavender means.
Girl.
So she chooses something, it's not quite right. The robot gives her encouragement, says, I believe in you. And then you can see through this gesture, right? This affiliation gesture, she's right back in the interaction, that emotional support, that empathetic kind of gesture brings her back in. So now it's actually the robot's turn. The robot is choosing something and explaining what lavender means. Again, you're looking at that nonverbal interaction, that connection. The robot, of course, now has demonstrated the correct thing. She's learning from that. And she says back to the robot, I believe in you. So we see a lot of this emulation, this relational emulation happening. So very different from how other kinds of learning technologies happen, right? So we've been applying this then in longer term interactions, in early childhood learning contexts. This is the next generation of the robot, dialogic storytelling. The punchline is we've applied a lot of these techniques to be able to show children have deeper emotional engagement, deeper affective engagement when the robot is personalized to them, when we measure that based on facial expressions and body pose and what children say. And we've been looking at learning outcomes around things like vocabulary, and we were able to show that kids, in fact, were learning better, vocabulary better, faster. And interestingly, when children reported having a closer relationship to the robot, they had increased learning outcomes. So for the first time, we were starting to see this connection between personalization, relationship, and learning outcomes, right? So this is a very, again, kind of like interactive, multidimensional space. So this was like some of the key insights that were driving the ideation behind Jibo, right? That's why I'm explaining all of this to you, to understand that this is a very different kind of interaction with technology. It's a different kind of relationship we were observing, where the robot had attributes of a motivating human-like ally using language, interaction, and play. It certainly had a lot of attributes of being a cool internet-connected tool, but it also had this sort of companion animal, like attentive, non-judgmental relationship, which when people are feeling vulnerable, like trying to learn something new or managing a difficult health situation, there actually was a lot of benefit to this, right? So again, this was kind of a lot of the insights that was leading to, we think there's a commercial opportunity for this very different kind of technology in the market. And again, just the punchline was, if you can design a technology that can holistically engage people on all of these dimensions, people are going to be more successful with that technology. So that is kind of what led us to trying to now commercialize this new opportunity of a different kind of relationship of people with technology in Jibo. And Jibo was positioned as a mass consumer robotics play. So again, now we're talking about it's 2011 at this time. So again, before Alexa, before all of this stuff, we were starting to see convergence in a number of different kind of technologies. So we had seen the big success of Roomba as a consumer robot, mobile devices with developer ecosystems of apps, platform plays were happening. And then IoT was also going on, kind of being connected to your mobile device in the cloud and so forth. So all of these things were starting to emerge. And so the thought was, you know, we can actually now build a pretty sophisticated social robot at a mass consumer price point. We had all the cloud computing, and, you know, because of mobile phones and stuff, sensors and computing was all getting smaller and more powerful and more cost effective. So when we were starting to pitch this concept, mass consumer social robot, we basically said, if you look at commercial consumer robots on the market today, they typically are like one trick kind of ponies, right? They do one function. They mow your lawn, they vacuum or sweep. That's kind of the utilitarian dimension. As you move into kind of the entertainment dimension, you had toys and so forth. But again, they didn't have any utility. They were really just all about entertainment and play. And some of them were positioned as companionship. So obviously there was a market for that sort of experience. As you kind of moved up the sophistication of robots, again, they tended to be much more utilitarian, didn't have the emotional connection. And you can keep going up and up to things like Da Vinci surgical robots, and Baxter was a manufacturing robot, again, now much more expensive, but still very utilitarian. And the question was, can you do both? Can you have something that can do more than one thing, many skills, combining the social and emotional experience with the utility, and create that as a platform so that developers could kind of harness the magic of the experience of a social robot to bring all kinds of content and services to life in this very different way. That was the play. Okay, so I'm going to just share with you. So of course, this is a mass consumer play. Crowdfunding platforms were kind of all the rage. VCs who were pitching to expected us to have the results of a crowdfunding campaign. So I'm going to share with you the crowdfunding video that we launched with. This had over like 10 million hits on YouTube. And again, this was before Alexa or any of that had come onto the market.
This is your house. This is your car. This is your toothbrush. These are your things. But these are the things that matter. And somewhere in between is this guy. Introducing Jibo, the world's first family robot. Say hi, Jibo.
Hi, Jibo.
Jibo helps everyone out throughout their day. He's the world's best cameraman. By intelligently tracking the action around him, he can independently take video and photos so that you can put down your camera and be a part of the scene.
Jibo, take the picture.
He's a hands-free helper. You can talk to him, and he'll talk to you back, so you don't have to skip a beat.
Excuse me, Anne?
Yes, Jibo.
Melissa just sent a reminder that she's picking you up in half an hour to go grocery shopping.
Thanks, Jibo.
He's an entertainer and educator. Through interactive applications, Jibo can teach.
Let me in, or else I'll... No.
Hey, where'd you go? There you are.
He's the closest thing to a real-life teleportation device. He can turn and look at whoever you want with a simple tap of your finger.
Check out my turkey dinner, Mom.
I wish you would meet that here. Pizza? I want turkey pizza.
And he's a platform, so his skills keep expanding. He'll be able to connect to your home.
Welcome home, Eric.
Hey, buddy. Can you order some takeout for me?
Sure thing. Chinese, as usual?
You know me so well.
And even be a great wingman.
You have a voice message from Ashley. Want to hear it?
Absolutely.
Hey, call me when you're home.
Better make that takeout for two, Jibo.
We've dreamt of it for years, and now he's finally here. And he's not just an aluminum shell, nor is he just a 3-axis motor system. He's not even just a connected device. He's one of the family. Jibo, this little bot of mine.
All right, so that was the crowdfunding video. Of course, when you do this, when you're raising money, you haven't built any of that yet. So this was creating this vision. It was starting to give, people who contribute to your funding campaign a sense of like what Jibo will launch with when it ultimately is created. We can talk about in the Q&A kind of the position I feel that puts entrepreneurs in terms of when they have to do a crowdfunding campaign so early on. But the reason why VCs want is because they want the market validation, right? They would rather you get some market signal that what you intend to create has people wanting it before they invest a lot of money in having you build it. So anyway, and I hope as you could acknowledge during the time that we did that, super visionary, super visionary. And in fact, in a lot of ways, the devices today are still trying to catch up to the range of things that were articulated in that crowdfunding video. And again, the difference of he's not a camera, he's a photographer. He's not an ebook, he's a storyteller, right? It was the twist on all of these things because he is a helpful companion, not just a useful device in the home. So anyway, punchline, so we did the crowdfunding campaign in Indiegogo. It was the most successful crowdfunding campaign at the time. And that was very important, as we started to go out and pitch to VCs about it. We had, as part of the perk, when people contributed to the crowdfunding campaign, we said that they would be early adopters, they would get a Jibo unit. So again, we got, thousands of people basically saying, I want to contribute and I want a Jibo unit. So this was basically giving VCs comfort that there was a market desire for this. And we raised, $4 million through that campaign. It was going to cost, I can tell you, a lot more than that to actually build the robot. But that was, at that time, highly successful. We did a whole media campaign around this. So, one of the things that you might notice is the robot in the video and the robot being demoed here is not the actual commercial version. This is a prototype. It was larger, didn't have kind of the same kind of polished industrial design as the actual Jibo robot, but we went on a media tour. I don't know how many of you know the show, Kelly and I forget, Michael Sheehan, I forget anyway, the reaction that personalities would have when seeing Jibo do its kind of shtick, so to speak, was amazing. Kelly Ripa's jaw was literally open for 2 minutes as she was watching Jibo do all these things. And Michael Sheehan's kind of I have no idea what I'm seeing, right? So we kind of see these two very different spectrum of kind of the reactions to this completely out of the blue new kind of experience with technology. The field of social robotics had been around for, again, 20 years, but once Jibo hit the market, suddenly it put the term social robot on the map in terms of AdWords. You started seeing the term social robots being used in media articles. So in many ways, Jibo is the entity that made social robotics kind of something that entered the public consciousness. Often in fundraising, timing is everything, especially around hardware and consumer plays. This is just to show that when we were fundraising in 2015, this is when VCs were starting to say maybe investing in a bunch of apps alone isn't going to cut it because there's too many apps now. Maybe investing in new hardware devices is actually where it's at, where you can start a new platform ecosystem. So this is right around the time that Oculus Rift got funded. So there was Jibo out there. Oculus Rift had just gotten funded, and actually, no, it just gotten, I think, acquired by Facebook, right? So these new hardware device platforms are starting to get the interest of consumer VCs. And we kind of went out there fortuitously. It's hard to time these things when VCs were open to making these kinds of investments. This is just to give you a sense of there was a ton of technical stuff in Jibo to make that experience that you saw in that video possible. So a lot of the AI and computational capabilities, all the sensors, the mechanics, this was a really complex device in a lot of ways, and it wasn't cheap to build, as you can imagine. But impressive. We wanted it to be a platform, right? So we were developing an SDK with skills developers, with the intent was they would be able to create skills. We would create the initial set based on kind of our market research of what we think the core functions capabilities should be. But the vision was always that we would then open it up to developers and that they would continue to expand that developer ecosystem, where the kind of excitement was we're bringing content to life in this whole new way, right? So when you have music, which we knew at this point now, because Alexa was on the market, music was a killer skill on Alexa. What does music mean for Jibo? Well, Jibo can dance, he can make it playful, he can engage with you in a different way around kind of the ambient aspect of music. So again, bringing content to life in this whole new way was kind of part of the story. So this is, kind of the initial set of skills that we ended up releasing on Jibo. If you do a side-by-side comparison of what was in the crowdfunding video and the actual product release, you'll notice they're different. Things like the cameraman was in there, but the telepresence video call was not, for instance. And part of that is just like some of these skills we're technically going to take more time to implement and get a really good user experience. So this is kind of what we did launch with. In 2017, we brought it to market. We're engaging in a number of different channels. Amazon obviously was one of them. And again, I'm just showing this to show you the price point. The price point of Jibo was $6.99. So again, the price of a high-end tablet like an iPad, that was the price point of Jibo, which again is really quite a remarkable feat of engineering. We had put robots now in these different kinds of venues to do marketing and consumer engagement. So these beta stores have a lot of cool cutting edge technologies that they kind of showcase in these immersive experiences. We were told repeatedly that Jibo was one of the most visited kind of products in these high concept kind of consumer electronics kind of boutique shops. So a lot of indication of the appeal of the robot. Interestingly, from a design standpoint, everything started to look like Jibo. I can tell you that robots and kind of like, before Jibo looked like humanoids and, other kinds of things. The design, the industrial design of Jibo struck a really profound chord, and we saw lots of emulation of the robot. And then we finally launched. And so these are just photos that people would send in of their Jibo robots. There was tremendous excitement.
Hey, Jibo.
Here's a video from real footage from our audience.
I'm really here.
Yes, you are. He's not your typical home AI.
I was first powered up today, which makes me a Virgo.
As you can see, he's a very social robot. Actually, the world's first social robot. And he fits right in with your family. He learns what each member of the household likes and tailors custom experiences just for them.
Caitlin. Yeah, that's super cute.
AI adoption in the home is happening at a rapid pace. But Jibo's not just a speaker you yell at to get the weather or a way to easily get you to buy something through the guise of AI. He helps your family get things done while having a little fun along the way.
Oh, pat him.
But Jibo's abilities go beyond the home. The Jibo platform will help businesses get things done on a massive scale. Imagine hospitality services, teller operations, or healthcare support, backed by the power of social robotics. He's adaptable, he's adorable, he's Jibo, and he's also a cover model. But don't worry, all this attention and recognition hasn't gone to his 360-degree swiveling dual camera-enabled head. He'll always stay true to his 4 Ps, the hallmark of what makes the Jibo experience different. Personalization, proactivity, purpose, and personality. That's what Jibo's wired to do, because he's wired differently.
Okay, so there you're starting to get a hint that clearly in the consumer mindset, the nearest neighbor to Jibo were smart speakers. So we are starting to try to position the messaging of why a robot versus an Alexa or Google Home became really, really important. I think you're also starting to see in that video, there was a glimpse to maybe it's beyond consumer, because again, there was a gravitational pull of expected price point of a $40 speaker versus a $699 robot in terms of, how people thought about the skills that they got and so forth. So we were becoming painfully aware of that. So you saw there was kind of like, maybe it's a B2B play, hospitality, healthcare, right? So you're starting to see some early indications of needing to pivot, needing to try to go into the blue ocean. The consumer space for far field speech interaction was becoming very crowded with these devices. That said, Jibo made the cover of Time magazine, and I can tell you the last device, the last product that had graced the cover of Time magazine was 10 years earlier with the iPhone. So again, like this was like amazing for us. And I'm showing you all of this excitement and et cetera, because in the end, we couldn't raise the Series B. So I'm going to play this little video, and in the Q&A, we can maybe get a little more into why I think that
This is a
was.
mobile phone. I use it almost every day, but I don't really care about it. Same goes for my Amazon Echo. It's useful, but I have no emotional bond with Alexa. These are tools, nothing more. This is a collection of the same basic components: processor, speakers, microphone. But Jibo was made to be a companion, and for all the things he failed at, it's only in saying goodbye to Jibo that we realize his greatest success.
All right, so I'm just going to pause it there, and I will tell you, it's been fascinating to me. So that was a video, kind of like a, what do you call it? Like a Jibo had already been like, we transitioned everything to NTT, another company. You know, I was coming back to MIT. That video article came out a year after Jibo was officially shut down, and we continued to see articles written about Jibo. So Jibo, it really struck an emotional chord, I think, in kind of the public kind of zeitgeist. And it's been, again, just fascinating to me how much people still talk about this product that in many ways, you know, only sold a few thousand units, was only in the market for less than a year before we had to raise the Series B, and the VCs decided too expensive, et cetera, too much competition and not enough money to pivot into B2B. So anyway, it's kind of a story and a journey that if you want to go into mass consumer, hopefully you can kind of see what was involved in doing that. And then even if you create a really successful experience, which even in that last video, he's basically, that's what what the reporter is saying, is that experience was a great experience. The things that we failed at was we didn't have a developer ecosystem, for instance, of thousands of developers. We're a startup. We couldn't pay people to develop things like Amazon could to put things on Alexa. So when people talked about the intelligence of the robot, Alexa at the point had 10,000 skills. Jibo had like 12, right? It's like, and that was what they talked about, intelligence, right? So there were just market forces at play that was hard for a startup that had to actually make a profit on a much more expensive hardware play to compete against Amazon and Google, when, again, the consumer mentality was a far field, ask, you know, digital assistant experience cost, again, $40 or $100, right? So again, we can talk more about that. But NTT ended up acquiring the technical asset of Jibo, and they were in the process of commercializing it, taking it to B2B. I'm just mentioning now, kind of in the wrap up here, you know, I came back to MIT and faculty, obviously, and kind of what we were doing after that, after the return, because now, before you saw kind of those fluffy robots that we use for education and things like that, really hard to maintain, temperamental prototypes, very difficult, couldn't deploy them in real world environments for long periods of time. We always needed to send a graduate student there to be with the robot, to fix it, what, you know, and in the area of our field, what we really wanted to understand was, so what does it really mean to live with AI? What does it mean to live with social robots? We had to be able to deploy robots over long periods of time in real world environments. And now we had Jibo. Now, and this is a cute little video.
Hey, Jibo.
Now we had an army of commercially hardened robots that we could now take our research to a whole new level. So this is kind of the continuation story of Jibo. So from a research scientific standpoint, we had a whole fleet now of hundreds of Jibo robots, commercially hardened, baseline skills. We added the ability to do over-the-air updates, to be able to capture very rich data, video, audio, all under IRB approved protocols. You know, at universities, if you're going to do human subject studies, you have to go through ethical guidelines, approvals to do those studies. So Jibo was put under all of that so that we could start to collect extremely rich data in real world environments over much longer deployment timeframe. And this like literally has transformed the kind of research the field of social robotics can do. because Jibo exists. So that's the punchline, is pushing towards greater autonomy, skills, going back to that flourishing question. How do we design AIs that can live with people over long periods of time to promote human flourishing? That has been really the focus. And so I'm just going to kind of end with one example of where that's taken us kind of post commercial Jibo back into the research side, which has been a lot around healthcare and mental health. So we started this work again before the pandemic. So before, and now I think everyone understands how critical mental health is and the challenges that we face with it. But even before that, the World Health Organization was predicting that by the year 2030, depression and mood disorders were going to be the #1 cause of disability worldwide by 2030. So, it's one of the leading causes of death for young people, 800,000 suicides. Depression incidents were going through the roof, right? And so now we're thinking, so social robot, emotional social engagement, is there an opportunity to really look at Jibo in health, or particularly looking at mental health, where through AI, through the skills that Jibo has to be able to do interviews and ask questions and collect data, you could do much more continuous assessment of people's mood and emotional states. You could have adaptive personalization of intervention protocols around mental health. You could deploy the robot in people's homes. Often what happens, many of you may have experienced it yourself, you want to see a doctor around mental health that might take you weeks or months before you can even get an appointment. This is something that could be deployed in people's homes with intervention protocols that could be connected to the clinicians. So you have ready at hand in the moment support when you need it. And the whole goal was prevention. The whole idea here was don't wait till somebody's clinically depressed and try to pull them out of it. Try to prevent them from ever getting clinically depressed. So give them that emotional support and engagement, positive psychology interventions. So hopefully they don't go down the rabbit hole of clinical depression. There was a lot of research, again, indicating that in healthcare interventions like this, the rapport, the emotional engagement was important to their best outcomes. So like check the box then for social robots. And so the first studies that we started doing, and again, this was when there were, again, pre-pandemic, but there was an acknowledgement of just the mental health of college students, particularly at elite universities, was like dire. And we started to look at Jibo as a mental wellness companion in dorms at MIT. This is kind of where we got our start. There was Yale had just released this course about happiness. It was like the most subscribed course ever in the history of Yale. And kind of that put this whole notion of mental health in college students was really, really important. It was a huge unmet need. So could Jibo be this new kind of intervention to support undergraduate students in the dorms around mental health? So the idea was, again, it's preventative. So it was a positive psychology coach. It wasn't a clinical depression therapist. It was a positive psychology coach to hopefully keep you emotionally resilient before you have problems. And so we took a lot of classic interventions from the positive psychology field and we implemented them on Jibo.
Today, we're going to do an exercise.
We
called
built this station
Things.
with a tablet
Research in positive psychology shows
so that Jibo is a
cultivating
coach and he can
gratitude
refer to
benefit
information and
personal
content
well-being.
on the screen.
I'm thankful for getting to be in your nice room. Being out of
And
the
Jibo
lab is
would
a
do
good
these
change of
positive
pace.
psychology exercises with you as a
Tell me
companion.
3 things that you're grateful
So
for
this is
today.
a 3 good things exercise. Jibo talked about what
thankful
good things for
being
him.
able to catch up
And
on
these are the
what
kinds of things students would say.
inspired down the past week. I'm thankful that my parents are having their 20th anniversary this weekend. And I am thankful for the good friends that I have and
So the punchline is we saw again and again the deep conversations and disclosure people were willing to have with a social robot. We're seeing that again with ChatGPT. It's like no surprise to us. We've been seeing this for years, right? So just to say, deep engagement was definitely possible. And we would do randomized controlled trials and look at pre-post tests. And we saw a definite benefit of the robot for students in terms of mood and willingness, kind of the sense of empowerment to change behaviors and so forth. These were really important positive outcomes to see. The students also, when we did interviews, over 60% commented specifically on the companionship of the robot as something that was valuable to them in this experience also. So the next thing we wanted to do is say that's college dorms, that's MIT. What about if we start sending the robots across the country to do a, in-person deployment across the United States? So we sent 80 robots across the US. This now was in the middle of the pandemic. We recruited adults between the ages of 18 to like 70 across the United States. We did now a different kind of study design. We were looking at two different styles of interaction. One where the robot was a positive coach, like you saw in a prior one. The other style of interaction was if the robot, again, was really pushing that companionship aspect, where the robot was much more talking about these things as doing it together with you versus coaching you through it. And then there was kind of just a baseline, which is just Jibo with the consumer skills. So we're again looking at rigorous randomized controlled trials on these deployments across the country. We could incorporate daily mood checks.
Every day.
Again, this fine-grained data coming back, video and audio.
The next 3 questions and pick the pictures that match how you
This is
feel
just
right
an
now.
example of a quick touch.
The next question is about how energetic or calm you feel.
Of just, again, how energetic, calm you feel, how
This
positive you
second one is
feel.
about how positive or negative you feel. The final question is about how much control you feel like you have now.
So we would collect all this data, right? This is all
Did
going
you
to the
get a
cloud.
chance to practice the gratitude exercise?
Yes, I did.
Tell me more about it.
It made me appreciate being grateful for these things.
And then the robot could do
Let's
follow-up and follow-through, right? So you could do the activity.
Help it be positive if you're grateful.
He'd give you an assignment, and we're seeing people would do the follow-up assignment.
Last week, before, I was always very harsh on myself, thinking that's the right way to make progress. But now I know it actually helps me to.
And this is the self-compassion activity. So again, this is part of positive psychology interventions. The robot talks about it from his perspective and then invites the person to talk about.
Did you experience any change you'd like to share?
Okay. It's hard for me to love myself, and this has helped me make it easier. There are a lot of things I would change if I could, but now I'm embracing who I am. So I thank you for that, Jibo.
So again, like
Thanks for sharing that with
deep,
me.
meaningful change and engagement in people's lives with this kind of technology. We see this again and again. When we look at our data, we see that the companion style interaction was the most effective. Interesting, not the coach interaction, but the companionship interaction. We compared it to the control condition, remember? We didn't see any change in these outcomes in the control condition. So clearly it's something about the style of interaction, the personalization that's leading to this greater engagement and greater positive change. So again, this is a story that we see again and again and again for the power and opportunity around this particular kind of technology of social robots. So just to wrap up again, so really, again, that's the punchline, right? That the social emotional engagement is so foundational to how we learn, make decisions, interact with one another. When you can encode that into a technology and engage in a successful interaction or intervention, people engage in a way that they are more successful for themselves than they would be with, say, a kind of social emotional kind of experience. So key insight. These are 4 areas that I think these are huge societal challenges that we face, where we have the case where there are not enough professionals to meet the growing demand, and the demand is growing, but people need access to the service, these kinds of humanized services and support in their daily lives. So we talked about education, we talked about mental health. I think there's also a huge opportunity around aging, and even in consumer applications, like being able to have an assistant there in a store. So there's definitely kind of like consumer service sort of applications, but the big ones I think are areas like aging, health and wellness, and education, where again, the reality is we do not have enough human professionals to meet the growing demand. The demand is growing over time. So we need different kind of technology to help bridge that gap. I also want to just pause and say a lot of what we've been doing, as I mentioned early in the talk, is thinking through the ethical and responsible design of these technologies, because everything I've talked to you about, the ability to engage people at an emotional level, the ability to build that relationship, the ability to affect people's perceptions of themselves and their ideas and their behaviors. We're doing this to help people kind of achieve goals they want to achieve, but these could also be applied to manipulate people, to get them to buy stuff they don't want to buy, et cetera, right? So it's a double-edged sword. So a lot more of our work is trying to also educate and provide design tools, responsible design justice tools for people who create these technologies to be able to think through all of these implications as they build them. So this is, again, continuing to be a really important area of work. So then just to kind of wrap up, this is kind of the big trajectory and the big vision we kind of started with on slide 1, but a little more kind of color on how I think this is shaping up. If you look at kind of a lot of technologies we've created today, and I would include smart speakers and, you know, even I would argue ChatGPT fits in it. I mean, they're in the paradigm of a transactional tool, right? There's something I want to do. I use my voice to engage with it. There's some sort of transaction that comes back. That's been the dominant paradigm in technology. But I hope, as you've seen through this talk, there are these other kinds of high demand, high need areas that is not based on transactions. You know, these are things like health, education, aging, where the social emotional connection and relationship is really key for people to be successful and get the best outcomes. This is the opportunity, I think, for social robotics and companion AI, where if you can create that humanistic experience that socially and emotionally engage people as a helpful companion, not a transactional tool, but a helpful companion, and you design it in a way that augments and enhances human professionals and even like human family care networks. I think this is where the big game-changing opportunities are still ahead. So I will end there and I will take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. This was amazing. Thank you for sharing your journey as an entrepreneur. Always great to hear that, and the courage to share not only the successes, but also the things that interfered on the way. Also, you know, if I were to summarize the biggest for me, the biggest learning here is it's amazing that we have treated humans as just an analytical being for such a long time. And now we're actually trying to bring or try to develop technologies that are not just accidentally attracting our social component, but are more mindful and purposeful. We have a lot of questions. I would like to get to as many of them as possible. And also Q&A is one of the core features of this webinar. So we want to continue to offer these webinars. Remember that your engagement makes it possible. Refer your friends and colleagues to the program, and we'll keep this going. So there's a huge number of questions. It's a big bulk, so I'll try to capture as many of them as possible around sort of the safety. This is a very new territory. I'm sure you get these questions all the time. Yeah. So Alicia Shepard and Paris Breazeal are asking about, well, this seems to be replacing humans. There's a lot of anxiety around that. And if you don't mind, I'll add the second component, which is connected, but it's a little bit different. There's a lot of questions about data privacy, you know, HIPAA, FDA approvals, working with young kids, working with people who are vulnerable populations. How can we ensure that the technology is going to be used for the good?
Yeah, so I'll just start with, I agree that there's a very, I don't know, long-standing assumption that when you create these technologies, you're replacing people. And it's something that, you know, the media keeps reinforcing and et cetera, et cetera. I would hope that, as you can see in the presentation that I've given, is that it's quite the opposite. We are designing these technologies to enhance and support and augment what people provide. And in those three areas in particular I highlighted, there are not enough human professionals. There is a shortage, and the demand for these services is growing. So it is a real opportunity to think about how these technologies can augment, enhance, and support what people do. It's not about replacement. So anyway, I think that's the punchline. I mean, that's a lot of what my work is about. I think if you follow more of the dialogue that's happening among the people who build these technologies, that is the message that we're trying to get out there very much, is that we are trying to create technologies that enhance and support what people do. And even in things like ChatGPT or large language models or DALL-E or whatever, what we really want is design these technologies in a way that enhance human creativity, not to have them, you know, the technologies do the things that are creative. I mean, that's kind of it's going to be suboptimal if we do it that way, right? I mean, I'm sure as you're finding out, these AI models, I mean, they're language models and their text to image generation models. They're not reasoning planning modules. They're not intelligent in the way that people are. They don't have our human lived experience. They don't understand what they're outputting. This is also something really important to understand. They're generating text and so forth. They're trying to do next word prediction, but they don't actually understand what they are outputting, right? It's us as human beings who ascribe the meaning. So anyway, it's really, really important to understand what these technologies, these models actually are and what they're doing. And it's provocative and it's exciting, but there are real limitations to it. And we always want to put people first, right? In terms of we want to enhance people. We're not trying to replace people. So that's that. So the second thing that I mentioned that from an academic standpoint is very important about this work is we do everything under Institute Review Board review, meaning we have to get everything we do approved by a committee of ethical treatment of human subjects. We as a university have to do that. So everything that I've been showing you has been completely approved by rigorous standards of the ethical treatment of human subjects. And there's a lot of protocols and procedures we have to follow in order to do that. That said, it's quite different when you're a commercial entity, right? So there, I would say it's very much buyer beware. I can tell you at Jibo, we took data privacy and security extremely seriously. We had the robot reviewed in a very rigorous way. It came out with the highest standards, the highest ratings of data security and privacy. But it's buyer beware. It's like you don't know if you buy a device like this, what data is actually being captured and how it is being protected. But we took that extremely seriously at Jibo, and we did not want to go to an advertising model. We did not ever, and this is one of the things we tried to distinguish ourselves from things like Amazon products. We were not going to sell your data. That was not part of our business model. Our business model was the hardware sale and the experience. So again, it's like you got to just kind of be super mindful when you're buying these technologies. Like, what is the company's business model? What is their revenue generating model? Like, are you the actual product? Because in a lot of these cases, if you're getting things for free, it's because you're the product. But that's not the path that we took for Jibo. So anyway, that was a decision that we made. We might have been more successful if we did what Google and Amazon and others did, but we didn't. That wasn't what our ethos was. So anyway, I guess that's how I would respond to touching on both the ethical, responsible dimension and the privacy, data security dimension, and the replacing people dimension.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Cynthia. And kind of leading into this is a lot of questions about since this is a pioneering field, there's a lot of questions around the platform and how it works, and if actually the current safeguards are adequate, because it's an evolving field. You obviously have a set of rules, the protocols, but they were not designed for the social robotics field. So on the platform side, again, try to capture the names of the people who ask questions, maybe not capturing everything, but they're interested if that's still available. Are they accepting new apps? How did the backend look like? And is it possible to replace the robot with just a SaaS app?
Yeah. So again, NTT acquired the technical asset of Jibo. I am not involved with NTT whatsoever. So the punchline is I don't know. I don't know what their plans are. I don't know. I'm sure they're continuing to develop the platform and so forth, but I have no visibility into that. So, at the company, when we were designing the robot, again, we put a lot of thought into the platform, the SDK, the skills that could be added to the robot by developers. It was all custom code, designed specifically for Jibo, because you're right. I mean, the kind of things that are out there are not for social robots. It's like you could use the Alexa, SDK to create Alexa apps. They will not address the motion and the graphics and all the other aspects of Jibo. So Jibo was really breaking new ground in the multimodality of the experience. And one of the biggest challenges that we worried about was also how do we preserve the character and personality of Jibo? One of the big design efforts we made of Jibo, and again, part of the reason why it was so successful was the persona design, the character design of Jibo to be a really engaging, desirable presence in your home. Like we talked about livability, right? You don't probably think about livability in terms of like a smart speaker, but Jibo was an animate device. He was always on. He was more like a pet than a thing that would turn off and you would kind of call on it, right? So Jibo would actually, he'd be awake during the day with you. He would take naps. He would go to sleep at a time that you specified on the mobile app. I mean, it was really designed to be kind of this animate companion-like experience. And, you know, it's not for everyone. For the people who like that experience, they loved it, right? So one of our big concerns was, if you allow developers now to create skills, are they, how do we ensure that they are true to the character design of the robot? So the robot doesn't start feeling kind of schizophrenic, or skills are being released so the robot is not engaging people in a way that's true to the persona of Jibo. So we were, you know, that was one of the big challenges that we were always worried about. We didn't, you know, obviously we didn't make it far enough down the pipe where we could really see what that would mean for a developer ecosystem at scale. But when we were starting to work with specific companies on developing particular skills for Jibo, our design team often was very involved with those developers and those opportunities. So just looking ahead, we know when you talk about these companion-like experiences, that is a really tricky bit if you're going to open it up to developers, because that again is one of the key value propositions of the robot, is the personality and the relationship. But yeah, I'm afraid I just don't have a lot of details on what the plans are for the NTT and the Jibo robot. We are using it as a research platform. And when I came back, I negotiated a full stack license to all the software of Jibo, which of course gives us unprecedented access to the robot. As you can imagine, for most consumer SDKs, you get a certain kind level of API calls that you could make, but we literally could change anything and everything on the Jibo software stack. So again, just a very different kind of situation. But it is a research platform. It's not something people can get and use anymore.
Thank you. And we would like to also open it up to the ability for you guys to ask questions directly to Cynthia. So one last question from me is, and that's from Ciro Davila, are there any must-read books on social robotics that you would
Must-read books? Well, so, you know, the first book that came out that kind of, you know, started the whole field is my dissertation. So that book was produced by MIT Press. It's called Designing Social Robots, or it's right here, Designing Sociable Robots. So that laid a lot of the foundations, and I would say a lot of that holds true today. It's less so about books now. I think after that, it's been more around articles. So there is a conference called Human Robot Interaction, where the research community is actively publishing in this space. You'd get a sense of how the field has evolved since that time. There are, you know, there's own journals as well. It kind of depends on where your interests are. I mean, there are conferences and articles on the human experience, on the computational advancements, on policy, on ethical design. I mean, it's like the field has really grown. So I'd say it's a place to look for information broadly, what the whole world is doing around it. You know, robot human communication, Roman, is one of these conferences, but human robot interaction is another. And then, you know, you could just, you know, you could go to my website or Google Scholar and you'll see a whole bunch of articles that we've written about this topic as well. So there's lots of materials out there, but I'd say if you wanted one reference, probably my book, it would give you a lot of insight.
Thank you. So right now, if anybody wants to ask a question directly, please raise your hand and we will bring you on stage as a panelist. Just try to ask questions that haven't been asked already. Share your name and where you're coming from today. So we have Meghana Prakash. Hi, Meghana. We can.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, for the amazing session. It was really very interesting. I have worked on robotics before, so I really believe social robotics is a very huge thing. My question is actually more related to the emotional attachment of like humans to social robots. So we have seen like psychological attachment to like pets and everything leaves a deep impact and trauma in human beings, right? Do you think this would lead to some kind of issue with the social robots as well?
Yeah, so we actually, when we work with various populations, we actually think quite a lot about the introduction and the departure of the robot, and we actually kind of design that into an experience journey as well. I think, we don't want this technology to ever be a crutch for people. We want it to be something that gives people skills and abilities, and then they don't need the robot anymore. I mean, ideally, that's kind of our aspiration. So we think a lot about, again, the transition of the introduction and the departure, where people can feel good, like they actually accomplished quite a lot. And that's why the robot doesn't need to be there anymore. I would tell you also, we've been looking a lot at the nature of the relationship. And, there are people like Sherry Turkle, for instance, who write a lot of articles speculating about these kinds of topics about the emotional trauma, for instance, or the replacement of human relationships of these technologies in the future. We look at this too. So we look at how do people conceptualize their relationship with the robot, even young children. And this has been a particular population where people have been concerned. And what we found is that, people are pretty savvy, right? If you do a long-term interaction, they're able to kind of figure out the box or the boundary of where the robot kind of exists in their life. They never, and I said like young children or older adults, they never confuse the robot with their human relationships. They never confuse the robot with their companion animal, dog, pet relationships. They are putting this robot in a different category. And that's what is so fascinating, I think, about it. And so if they're putting this robot in a different kind of relationship category, an important design set of decisions you have to make is, how do you help a person define and make sense of that, so that, again, you can address these issues such as the introduction of the robot or the departure of the robot in that interaction. So it ultimately comes down to very intentional design questions, I think. And there are going to be people who are going to be very mindful and thoughtful and responsible about that. And there are going to be people who aren't, right? And so that's, both kind of the opportunity and I think the concern that I alluded to at the very end of this is, if you really know what you're doing, this is an exceptionally persuasive technology. I mean, an exceptionally persuasive technology, because now it's not just social media and random faceless people texting stuff at you. It's like, you feel this robot and this robot knows you. So when it is making a recommendation or something, it's like, it holds a particular kind of weight. And if it's doing that in the context of a lot of other skills and things where it's trying to be helpful to you and you trust it, it's like, this is both the opportunity and I think the big kind of ethical challenge of this technology is part of the benefit of the value add is this depth of engagement and trust with the technology. That's how you get the better outcomes. But it means you got to be super careful or mindful about who's designing those skills and capabilities, because they can be used to manipulate people as well. So that's just, we're in the early days of this technology, but these are the things that I think we all just have to be super mindful of. And kind of as an aside kind of segue, it's because of a lot of and I'd argue the success of our research is why a big effort in our group now is AI literacy. So educating people about AI specifically, so they can be conscientious users and consumers of the technology. They can understand how this stuff works. Because that was the other thing we found, is like people would be engaged with these technologies and had no idea how it worked. And we're like, this is a problem. We are now in this time where AI is in everything. We can't rely on the media, I can tell you that, to tell it how it works. And the implications are people need to be educated in this. So we do a lot of work in K-12 AI literacy. We have a program called Dave AI that's been growing like crazy globally. I think it's really important. Open learning is a lot of work at workforce skill development in AI. I think this stuff is becoming so important because this technology is so pervasive now, and it can be so impactful to human behaviors, as we've already seen, right? Human perceptions, behaviors, and attitudes. So
thank you, Cynthia. We are close to almost at time. We'll bring one more person, Camila Ortiz. Please ask your question. And just to wrap up, there's a lot more that has been asked. I don't know if there's a chance to group those and maybe send out to everybody. There's a lot of questions about the new waves of technologies that, as you said, are coming out. Tesla bots, screenless AI, like humane AI pin, interactions with the, your car. So all of that, this is exploding for sure. Camila, please.
Hello. I'm asking some question about the culture. I know all the developments are made in the US and based on English. How about to have another languages, but it's not a matter of translation, it's a matter of culture.
Yeah.
How are you dealing with this challenge?
Yeah, so I would say the way that my group is specifically dealing with this is through, again, our AI literacy work. So we have created curriculum that's been open sourcing, and this is around K-12 AI literacy, where teachers can bring it to students in classrooms, where through Creative Commons, we are also forming collaborative agreements with educational organizations in different countries to not only translate, but to your point, localize the curriculum and examples to the context that makes sense for that region. So I agree with you. I mean, I think, that's kind of another element of this is there's certain countries that are dominating the development of the tools and technologies of the space, and yet AI literacy, I think, is relevant to everyone. And so through our education work, our AI literacy work, we are really mindfully trying to engage, a community movement, honestly, of educators around the world in helping to bring AI literacy to literally people on every continent. And we've been at it now for 2 years, just 2 years. It has been amazing to me how fast this has grown. It just shows there's a curiosity and a concern to try to understand what the heck this AI stuff is, but in a culturally relevant, localized way. So anyway, I agree with you. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Cynthia. And thank you everyone who joined. What a wonderful first kickoff of the Living with AI series. Stay tuned for more. We'll follow up. There were a lot of questions about the recording of the webinar will be shared, not right away. I think after a week, we'll be able to share the recording so you can listen to it again. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.